Okay, we're here in Glenties, of course, for the Glenties electoral area. We're in the Highlands Hotel. Brian Boyle, the returning officer, is with me here. His team have been working very, very hard. It's coming to the end game here, Brian, and around the county and different county centres there's still a lot of activity. It might take a bit longer to get everything sorted out, but for you guys, I suppose there's a huge responsibility here to make sure that everything runs smoothly, because we can see the sense of excitement there is and the sense of nervousness there is among the followers of the people who are on the ballot sheet, never mind themselves. So a big job for you and your team.
Yes, it is, Charlie. In fact, the process would have started about 5 or 6 weeks ago, when the candidates would have come in to me for the nomination process, and that in itself is quite a complex process, and there are different requirements for people who are members of political parties and then for people who are not members of political parties. So we've been engaging now with these candidates for about the last 5 or 6 weeks, and as you say, it's culminating now here in Glenties tonight, but for the candidates in this particular electoral area. But there's also counts happening as we speak in Letterkenny and in Buncrana and in Donegal town. The count for Stranraer has finished just earlier this evening, and the 6 new members have been elected there. So it is, as you say, it's a very public event, and it generates a lot of interest in the public, and that's as it should be as a democratic process. But I suppose for us, we have a huge responsibility to make sure that the process is done correctly, and that the result that emerges is the result that the people have voted for, and it's one we take very seriously, actually. And sometimes, I suppose, people say we don't understand why something is taking so long, or this should have been done by now. But the reason is because we just take the time to make sure that everything is done accurately and correctly.
Yeah. And I suppose a perfect example of how important that you do that is here. Ian Malloy and Terence Sloade are going to go for this final seat, and there's a handful of votes between them. So, we're at this stage, but much earlier there was somebody surplus there was somebody being eliminated there, and there was votes that you couldn't use for one reason or another that were non-distributable. So really, Brian, from the outset you've got to get it right, because 10 hours later, if someone says, well, I think there was a slight error there's a lot of groundwork to go back over if that's the case.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yesterday, as you know, you were there, Charlie, in Letterkenny. We spent a day separating out the European papers and the local authority papers and checking and totalling them. But the first act we did this morning when we got to our own count centres was we checked those papers again to make sure the bundles that we received were the right and the totals were accurate, as a double check. So we wanted to make sure that when we reached the first count situation that we were reasonably happy that it was accurate, because that tends to assist then the subsequent counts later in the day.
Yeah, and you've got to deal with the tally men as well, because obviously they're very keen when those papers are being separated to get a total, and we all know it's not the perfect total, but at the same time it's a great guide, and if there's a big differential then when the first votes are announced, people are going to start asking questions, Brian.
Yeah, well, it's an integral part of the process, and we made a conscious decision as well to work with the tally people because they have a job to do, and it's helpful both to the candidates and the agents and the press and the media and ourselves as well, to get an indication of the way things are going. So we took a conscious decision yesterday to spend some time in the morning, folding the papers out and giving them an opportunity to check them. And in fact, there were some boxes we even put out for the second time when they missed the original one.
Yeah, sure.
So, but it's a question of our job as facilitators, really. We're trying to facilitate an election process. We try to help the candidates, their agents and the media to get as good an insight to the process as we can give them, really.
Yeah. And obviously with the system we had in place, everything going to the Aura yesterday, you need a huge number of people on the ground to actually perform what happened in the Aura, because we were there for it and we saw how intense it was and the pressure that your people were under to get it right, and then of course start this morning again. In terms of numbers, Brian, how many people had you on the ground over the last couple of days?
Well, yesterday's procedure now was managed by the European local returning officer, Geraldine O'Connor in Letterkenny. She would have had 70 people counting yesterday, and I guess about 10 or 12 supervisory staff. We would have about 120 or 130 people at the individual council. These would be county council people, ostensibly, with some additional people added on. About 120 or 130 people in the 5 count centres today as well, working from kind of 9 o'clock this morning. Doing the local authority individual counts.
And I suppose you guys are part of the community as much as all the people you've mentioned as well, and you sense the excitement that's involved in this as well. It's a big deal for the people whose names are on those sheets for people to vote in order of their preference, and all the people who work with them and all their families. So it's a real big deal locally, this, and I suppose, as they say, a local election is really one of the most exciting places you can be when those votes start to count.
Oh, absolutely, and I have huge, and my staff have huge admiration for any person who puts their name on a ballot paper. It's one of the bravest things you can do, because you can be successful, you can be less than successful, and if you're not successful, it's a very public event then when you're not successful, and we would be very conscious of that and would have huge regard for those people, and that's the essence of the democratic process, Charlie, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Is it useful? This thing only comes around every 5 years, Brian?
Well, you wouldn't like to be doing it every weekend, I can tell you that. So probably a 5-year period is quite an optimum period of time to be doing it.
Yeah. And of course it's an exciting time in some sense as well, because the town councils have been abolished now, and they were very much part of the communities that they were in. Maybe in rural communities they didn't understand that as well. These 35 councillors who are going back now to this new look county council, there's a big responsibility on them.
Yeah, I suppose it is a historic occasion actually. With the abolition of the town councils in Bundoran, Ballyshannon, Buncrana and Letterkenny, the membership in Donegal County Council is now going from 29 to 37, and we had 2 members of the previous council didn't run, so we were guaranteed 10 new members in any case, but there's going to be some more now as events unfold, and I suppose for the first time now in a long number of years, the landscape has significantly changed, and that I suppose the local government power now is based centrally in Lifford.
Yeah, and is that a good thing, do you think, Brian? Does that improve the situation from what it was previously?
Well, I wouldn't like to make a comment, a political comment of any kind, Charlie. But there would be a feeling abroad, I suppose, that maybe some of the larger towns maybe could have benefited from retention of their town council.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
But I suppose it's a matter of opinion. Yeah. But it's neither here nor there now, because it's an eventuality that has come to pass.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I know on behalf of everybody, Brian, we appreciate the job that you guys do, and I mean, no one more than myself got frustrated at times thinking, what the hell's going on, why is it taking so long? But you've outlined it, how important it is to each candidate to know at the end of it that this is as well as I could have done. This is what the people said, and I'm elected or I'm not elected, because it's reassuring to know that everything was done properly and done right, because the last thing you want is a doubt in your mind that something wasn't done properly, or there was a little glitch somewhere along the line that cost you a seat.
No, I mean, I would be very anxious that every candidate and agent, and indeed everybody connected, and even members of the public, would be assured and reassured that we would go to the nth degree to make sure that every vote is dealt with properly, every single one of them.
Pleasure talking to you, Brian.
And
thanks
likewise, Charlie, thank you very much.